Leonard Mudachi is the CEO of Big Square Restaurants in Kenya, and he's also the chairman of the Retail Trade Association of Kenya, Retail Traders Association of Kenya, RETRAC. Leonard, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to see you smiling, so maybe things are not so bad, or maybe you just got it to a point where unavumilia.
You just have to smile because things are pretty brutal at the moment. There's not much to smile about, but yeah, we're alive and we're healthy. Maybe that is worth a smile. But other than that, on the business front, it's quite heavy hitting.
Our colleagues on Vibes Radio would have played for you that song. Do you see anything to smile about? Paint for us the picture, Leonard. For example, for your establishment, Big Square, how has this impacted you?
Of course, we experienced this for the first time last year. Yeah, but let me talk about what's immediately ahead of us and paint a picture for the last 4 days. So these directives were made on Friday afternoon. Friday was our last normal day of trade. We have a 12-store footprint. So we have 12 stores across the country. 2 of them are outside the lockdown zone, 10 are in Nairobi. And so we have 2 branches trading normally in Eldoret and in Mombasa, but the rest are trading. The weekend, we did about 28% of our budgeted sales. That's a 72% drop in sales. Note that while you drop, we make the bulk of our money on weekends. Weekends are strong for us, like any restaurant business. No concessions on rent yet. Salaries are still the same. Power went up in January this year. And so it's bleak. It's bleak and it's scary because we had to sign. We had to go back. We did 5 months last year on salary cut, and that time there was time to wait and see and then make the decisions. But this time, you know what's coming. You know how it's going to hit you. We're a relatively young team. My average age of our staff is 26. So these are young Kenyans who are facing, first of all, delivery and takeaway, which is the only thing we can do in Nairobi, does not require as many staff. So you've been hit on 2 sides. One, you cannot have sub-dining guests. Second, you have been limited to only delivery and takeaway. And so you have to reduce the number of staff that you use. So it's bleak. It really is bleak, and it's a bit confusing as to how we go forward, particularly when you consider that as an industry, we had to conform to quite a few things that other industries have not been subjected to, which include in a Nairobi County setting, they include we have to get COVID licenses. There was a COVID license that was created when they reopened restaurants in July last year for trade. So we are inspected every 3 months. We have to review that license from the Department of Public Health, and they come and inspect our facilities to ensure that we still conform with the protocols that the Ministry of Health set out for the opening of restaurants. So we wondered why, when we are such a high impact industry, particularly on employment of youth, supply, not even gone into the conversation with the farmers and what we consume as restaurants and eateries. So we wondered why other initiatives, like for example, mass vaccination exercise, classification of waiters and cooks as frontline workers, are not considered as a way to ensure that our doors remain open. Right now, our biggest worry as an association is that no one's thinking about profit. Everyone's thinking about, will we make it open? Will we be open to trade after this is over? Don't know if this is a time-based lockdown. We're hoping that it is maybe a short-term fire break measure that can get us back to trading. But we acknowledge, and we are Kenyans, and we have seen the impact of the pandemic in the globe. But there's also a debate of lives versus livelihood. What kind of livelihood will be behind when we are finished with the pandemic?
Sure. Leonard, at the risk of dragging out the grim picture, which, however, I understand is important so that we all get an idea of what it really looks like, how immediate was the impact that we see on establishments? I mean, from Friday, are we looking at immediately this announcement was made, immediately jobs were lost, immediately you had to shut down? And I mean, I'm just imagining things like supplies that you had in store then could not be used. How immediate was the impact in terms of jobs, in terms of what you had? I mean, and not just for you, but even across other establishments as well.
So the directive was made on Friday and took effect. So Friday was a pretty normal trading day. And don't forget, we were hit twofold, because we were hit, one, from the stopping of in-dining experience, so we can't sit guests in the restaurant. And then we were hit by the reduction of the trading hours. So not only do you lose your sitting space, but you also lose the hours of trade. So basically, wake up Saturday morning and you cannot sit guests in the restaurant. So it was immediate. Of course, measures like the impact becomes greater the smaller the restaurant, but it's immediate because, like I said, our weekend was 28% of our budgeted sales, and that Saturday and Sunday were, to be polite, a disaster. You, with all your intentions, the fundamentals of any eatery, let me say that, not just restaurants. We define where we want to go based on our trade, our stock in trade dislocation. You want to be at the location that has the most attractive foot traffic for your customer base. And this is not just upmarket restaurants or mid-tier restaurants. It's everywhere. You know, the lady who's cooking for the construction workers is right outside the construction. And I, or Big Square, for example, we want to be in high foot traffic locations that attract the customer. Now, you've negated location overnight. Let me give you a practical example. We have two locations in the CBD. We have one at 680 and we have one on Moya Avenue. Both really good performing restaurants. We're quite happy with how they perform at the customer. CBD is not a delivery. It's not a delivery location. You don't have much delivery and takeaway business happening in the CBD. So very fast, we have our top 3 or 4 sites dropping to the bottom because they do not even come close to 20 or 30% of their budgeted daily sales.
There's something that I want to ask here, and actually it's more I'd like to understand.
Yes.
When COVID first hit our shores and you had to deal with all these drastic measures that were now forced upon you, what would you say are the lessons that you learned then that you've been able to benefit from now that we have a second major lockdown?
So the big lessons were, thank you for that question. So let's not forget when we had the first lockdown, this was the big unknown. I've been in this industry for the last almost 25, going on 30 years, and we had never seen anything similar to this. And so there was a lot of wait and see, so we would strategize and say, this is our plan of action. We will, however, implement after we see how this week or the next 2 weeks go. There was none of that now. We knew that the measures that we have to take and how immediate they are. Of course, they are longer, drawn-out conversations, which you wish were immediate, but are not. For example, landlords, around the majority of the landlords from December have gone back to normal. We are yet to establish concessionary rent for this lockdown period because individual negotiation between tenant and landlord. So we're still at full rent for spaces we can't use. So the learnings are, the social learnings are, of course, the ones which are a bit of a struggle because you feel a bit helpless. And let's not forget that there were some minor, we felt they could have been stronger, but there were some minor tax benefits which are not in place now. We dropped, there were some minor tax breaks which were given, but you all know from looking at your individual pay slips that come January salary, those had gone and are not in place anymore. So let me give you an example. We're now thinking about the usual taxes we're going to have to pay. We're waiting we are planning for, the order in which your statutories come for any entrepreneur, small business, even large business.
Yeah.
You start with your NHIF, NSSF, and for us in our industry training levy, and then you go to your VAT, PAYE, and the rest. And we're preparing for it. I'd like to point out that the restaurant business is no different from any other business. We operate on a cash flow cycle. So you generate cash from your sales and you use it to meet your expenses and whatever it is you require to run your business. But at no time in any business that I've been part of or that I know is there a pool of money sitting in a corner waiting for use. So when I'm saying that we are frustrated because our cash flow cycle has been disrupted, it's because there was no money sitting in a pool waiting for VAT. There's no money sitting in a pool waiting for PAYE.
Yeah.
So I've had the majority of March being a normal trading month because we traded until the 26th of March normally. But we used that money to pay suppliers. We're banking on a good weekend so that we now come in and meet our obligations on Monday.
And cash
but
in
one
on
of the
Easter.
things, cash in. And of course, Easter, everyone was looking forward. I was listening to Mohammed Hersi yesterday on the show. And everyone was cashing in on or waiting to cash in on Easter. So we will meet a crunch. And I'm glad Senator Watangula touched on it in the clip you played at the beginning of this session. We are big employers, and we are going to suffer greatly. But our biggest concern is, will we be there to trade, or as many as
Will
we
you
are now
survive?
in the market? Will we survive? That is the elephant in the room.
Leonard,
And
as I hear you talking about the lessons that you've learned in the last 1 year, I'm waiting to hear the lessons that you've learned in how you can then adapt the business to this reality. Because it was clear last year what you faced. It was also clear that we were not out of the woods yet. And there was a likelihood of this kind of lockdown coming again. So are there things that you had prepared and thought, in the event of a second lockdown, this is what we can do and roll out immediately, in terms of even thinking, okay, so our big branches, the two big or the top three big branches in the CBD, in the event of a lockdown, we can actually do this and the other, and they'd not go drop immediately to the bottom three. But even if they drop, they'd still be able to bring in some revenue. Are there any lessons that you took that you are now able to deploy?
So the biggest lesson for us is pivoting or adapting to a delivery and takeaway model. And let me share with you some data. For us as a business, I don't know about the data from our competitors, but January last year, delivery and takeaway accounted for about 16% of our total sales. Yeah? By the end of April last year, we had managed to grow this to a high of 35%. And this is by initiatives to now use the delivery and takeaway. But don't forget, Lati, I depend on you. Yeah? You and Muga sitting there after a long day when you're heading home. You pass by my place and you have something to entertain yourself. Now, if you're not there and you have to be out at a certain time, social decisions are not, they are time bound.
Yeah.
For example, let me give you a practical example of take you back to October to November. October was actually a really decent recovery month for us last year. So, however, we lost 1 hour. Curfew was moved from 11, was it 11 to 10 or from 10 to 9? But in November last year, October, the curfew was slightly longer, and then it was reduced in November by an hour. That hour last year cost us 12% of this. And let me explain why. Yeah. So let's say you are on your way to home, yeah, and you and your friends decide you're going to meet for a drink and a chat, and you come into your space and you say, okay, we'll meet, we'll finish work at 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock. We're walking into the restaurant. Yeah. Now, you walk into the restaurant, you comfortably want to chat for 2-3 hours, and then hop into your matatu or your car and head. Now, when you lose that 1 hour, yeah, the decision to even go out changes.
It changes.
Because they're like, I go out and then I just talk. We talk for only an hour, and then I have to now go find a matatu. The matatu's under pressure because the curfew, etc. So what happens is people just decide they're not going out. Yeah, and that changes habits and how people entertain themselves. It have an impact. I must admit, for me, the 1 hour translation into 12% of sales was a surprise, because I didn't at that time take heed of the fact that it would be that big an impact. 1 hour trade. So it's some of the things that as an industry, maybe we would request a bit more understanding on how we trade, on how it works, and maybe even a greater seat at the table, so that as such decisions have been made, we can be heard, and our views and our impact on the economy can be taken into consideration, and the decisions can be made when they have understood what is going to be the ripple effect to us and our contribution to the tax-based population.
Let's take a break at this point. We're having a conversation with Leonard Mudachi. He is the chairman of the Retail Traders Association of Kenya and also the CEO of Big Square chain of restaurants in Nairobi and around the country. The impact of this new lockdown orders on this kind of businesses. When we come back out of this break, we'll be asking Leonard, so what is it that they would like to see? The fact of the matter is, there's a third wave. The fact of the matter is, something needs to be done to contain this third wave. So what is it that businesses such as his would like to see done? It is the Situation Room broadcasting on Spice FM, KTN Home and online, having a conversation with Leonard Mudachi, chairman of the Retail Traders Association of Kenya and CEO of Big Square Restaurant. They've been hard hit by the current lockdown orders. Leonard, you understand, of course, where we are and why the president had to make the decision that he took the decision that he took. What would you have liked to see in cognizant of the fact that there is a third wave that needs to be addressed, but also there are businesses that are likely to be affected? What would your suggestion have been?
Our big ask, and I think if you were to ask me for only one thing, what would it be? My request would be that we have dining and services resumed, simply because there were protocols that were set and designed by the Ministry of Health for us, and they were given to us in July last year. We did conform, and may I say we conformed at investments which we had to make, monetary investments which we had to make ourselves, and we have conformed. Most restaurants in Nairobi are already sitting maybe 50% of their capacity. They are not at full capacity because of the designs and conformity to those products. So my overarching request would be the resumption of dining service. That would be a big help to us. It would still lose out on other areas, but that would be a big help. Second, when we talk about vaccination and frontline workers, if we could be considered as a priority on that list, and I say we, being our staff in restaurants, we tend to have relatively young teams, and so if we could be considered as frontline workers so that we can get vaccination in. Third, is there tax concessions that we can give? Yeah, we are paying we pay as an industry, as you know, over and above VAT. We are the only industry, hotel and restaurant industry, that pay the training level, which is 2%. There's no training place. They're taking place. Kenya Hotel College is closed. Then we have a temporary suspension of that level to help us to use those funds to other support. But even just a conversation with Treasury, we do have. Interestingly enough, we are now getting into April, where April is tomorrow, and as you are aware, we have this new beast called the minimum tax. And minimum tax actually takes quarterly. It's supposed to be billed. We're supposed to be taxed minimum tax quarterly. So first quarter minimum tax will be due in the month of April, because the first 3 months are January, February, March. Now that's hitting someone when he's down. Could someone look into maybe suspend the minimum tax? I know there's no joy with regards to minimum tax across many industries. Yesterday we saw a gazette notice from the government that some airlines, Kenya Airways, has been exempt from minimum tax. They have joined the exemption list. So if consideration have been made, I just think it's a difficult task to hit us with this thing. So I hope that we could be hard on those pleas. But like I say, and I'd like to emphasize, if we can just get back dining, maybe we stand a fighting.
But with these dining services, Leonard, like you just said yourself, the decision making for customers to come into your establishment are social. Now, what we are trying to avoid in this particular phase is those social interactions. How do you strike that balance with trying to control the social interactions while at the same time allowing the social interactions to take place?
Yep, I think that has been addressed by the design of the protocols that were set by the Ministry of Health. Because if you look, like I said, for us, I don't know what is the case for other restaurants or eateries, but we lost 50% of our 50% of our city. That means that at full capacity today, I seat half the number of people I would have sat in January last year. So that's because of social distancing and other protocols that we have to adhere to that. As a result, I think that we're not seeing also, it's not like you're seeing full house restaurants. And at this point, maybe I just want to emphasize the difference between, we're not bars, we're restaurants. You don't see us, we're not partying at big crowds. When we do have, when you do sit, if I could show you one of our restaurants, you see that even at full capacity and full conformity to the protocol, we do adhere to what I think is big distances and reduced social.
When talking of strategies, I want to ask you three things. One, I'm going to start with asking, in the time you've been in this business, and you said it's well over 2 decades, going to a third decade, is there a time business has been so good that you have, or you've seen the industry able to put aside money for a rainy day? This rainy day thing is something that I like. I like the idea. That's one. Secondly, when we talk about innovations and what may actually balance this particular situation in favor of the government as it could and also in your favor, how often are your views actually taken into consideration, and how often do you actually see these views being put into practice by those who actually we've given the mandate to, I'm thinking of a phrase that is decent and polite, to look after our lives. Yeah, that I think is polite enough. Okay. The third one I will ask when you've answered the first two.
Okay, let me start with the first, and I would say that the restaurant industry has always been vibrant in a Kenyan context. What we have seen the emergence of my direct answer to your question is that the last 10 to 15 years have been pretty good for the restaurant industry. And you just need to look at the investment that has gone into it. When I was starting my career in the restaurant space, the company I worked for was the largest in East and Central Africa and had a footprint of 6 restaurants. Yeah, that was way back in 1999 to now. Now you're talking about restaurant chains that are going to 70, 80 units. And I think that speaks for itself in terms of the investment that developed. You people go out. Eric mentioned that yesterday he was in Bali Arcade. And you just need to look at the amount of investment that is going into restaurant design, restaurant fit out. And it's very different from what it was maybe in the early 2000s or late 90s. So that is indicative that we've had a good run. Ebbs and flows here and there, but generally I think as a restaurant professional, I can say that the last 10 to 15 years have been pretty decent. With regards to putting something aside for a rainy day, like any other business, we do put something aside, but we mainly use it to fund growth and develop, because the more stable you are in terms of your ability to generate revenue, the greater success that you have. The greater chance of success that you have in the future. But there are always unknowns. When I look back in my career, the last time we experienced an unforeseen situation that did have an impact was when they flew planes into the Twin Towers in New York. And that was just September 11th. And we're just preparing for a pretty decent Christmas season. And tourists just stopped coming to Kenya. Flights were stopped and there was a mess. That's before this 2020 last year. That's the last time I experienced, as an individual, experienced salary cuts as a result of reduction in trade. As to whether our views are hard, I would say it can be better. And I would say it can be better from the perspective of even understanding the fundamentals of how our business works. The tendency is to think that the hospitality industry is hotels. So the seat at the table tends to be given more to hoteliers. And even the planning, when we think about the levy, the levy is designed for a hotel sector. The restaurant as a freestanding sector, we are still working towards getting our voice heard and getting our dynamics load. So we are hoping to achieve more with that in the coming months to track other.
My last question relates to innovation and the things that can be done to ensure that you find ways and means of overcoming, because this one isn't really a rainy day. This is a stormy day, okay?
Yeah.
Or a stormy season. I was reading and I came across restaurants in some parts of Europe that have introduced partitions. Some have introduced see-through cabins so that the people who walk into an eatery are more or less secluded from everybody else who is there. Now, someone will argue, but when they come in, they'll mingle and what have you. We mingle every day anyway when there isn't a curfew. So that really shouldn't even be an issue of discussion. But if we're talking about the safety that is brought about by social distancing and by ensuring that you follow COVID rules, then there are innovations that one can put in place, even as one puts across one's particular petition for being allowed a little more room. What your industry, you are the chair. What are some of the discussions that you and the people who form this association that you chair, what are you thinking about in terms of making it possible for people to actually go out despite COVID?
Muga, I wish you could, if you're free after the show, I'd happily walk you through some of our outlets to see what we actually put in place. And I know other players in the industry have done the same. Some of the things that you mentioned are in place and were part of the protocols that were laid out by the Ministry of Health. But we also have to balance our ability to execute protocols that have a capital expense pegged to them at a time when your revenues have just tanked by significant amount, because the ability limits by the season. But I feel that if you are to look at the detail that the Ministry of Health guidelines and protocols, the detail that was laid out there, I think it was quite significant. And we felt that numbers were not, I don't want it to sound like prior to the lockdown or this season of lockdown, we were back to maybe 2019 numbers, because we weren't. But we were trading at about 80% of 2019, which was acceptable. At least you could make ends meet with those kinds of numbers. But what we're seeing now is going to be hard. So I acknowledge, and I don't want to sound flippant at how important or how serious this pandemic is. But I also have to balance the reality on the ground and what we will have to do when the pandemic is gone. So I would like to think about things like let's take the point I made earlier about vaccination. Is that an option? Can we have? I would have expected, or we as an association would have expected, that lockdown comes with an extremely aggressive vaccination program across the board, because that will then create immunity that enables us to progress on with our life.
So all these things that you're saying, Leonard, and there are proposals, suspend the training levy, suspend the adherence to the minimum tax at this particular point, allow us to have the dining guests as retrack. Have you prepared this memorandum? Have you reached out to the COVID-19 committee chaired by Mutahi Kagwe? Have you made any sort of outreach to the government with this?
Coincidentally, yes, we have. Yesterday, we did write to 3 of the ministries of government, highlighting our positions and making our suggestions and our pleas. With this regard, we wrote to the Ministry of Tourism, which is a direct ministry for under. We wrote to the Ministry of Trade, and we wrote to the Ministry of Health, just outlining a lot of the points that I have raised today, and trying to seek an audience to see if there's anything that can be done for us to assist us in safeguarding. And we'll continue to do so in various. This is above and beyond the regular lobbying that we do, and the participations in fora that better highlight our position. But because I like Muga used the word, it's a storm. It's not a rainy day, it's a storm. So we're in a storm. And we continue to try a whole host of measures to assist, to get us back on our feet. So yes, we are actively engaged. We're taking a multi-pronged approach to this. We're not sitting back and doing just one thing. We're trying to do multiple things. Yeah. Even when you look at the future, yeah, we would like to grow. We know that this is a season; it shall come to pass.
Okay.
As restaurant companies, we would like to grow, but that, of course, is all looking a bit bleak at the moment.
Before Ndu asks the question she's about to ask, there's a message for you here from Senator Johnson Sakaja. He says, share that memo with him as well in the Senate.
Yeah, tell him no problem. We'll get him a copy of the 3 letters that he sent out.
Okay.
One of the things that stood out very clearly, even with the closure, with the suspension of in-person dining, I mean, you just want to look at the practicality of the situation as it is, because truth be that these memos, these suggestions that are being made to government to allow certain things to happen, probably going to take some time before they're looked at, before they're discussed, observed, and if anything is done about it. But of the things that you can do right now, today, do you see that you would be able to, at least make a little bit of a ripple with takeaway dining, for example, from the people that you have that would normally come in and have a meal? Is there enough bank that you can place on them at the moment to do a takeaway service? Is that a practical solution to some of the problems that we see now?
I would say yes and no. We have grown. We as a business have grown our takeaway business, takeaway and delivery business, threefold from what it was same time last year, or let me say from what it was pre-corona. What we are able to do on a brilliant day of delivery is 3 times what we were doing in January 2020.
Okay.
However, you as diners and as social people, if I was to take you on a date today and I tell you that we are sitting in my dining room and we are getting delivery, I may not be as charming as if I took you out to a nice country. The recreation of the experience is not the same. So there is an element, and I take you back to the beginning of my conversation when I say fundamentally we are location-based people. We succeed based on your ability to select and fit out good locations.
Yeah.
So that's a very hard thing to replicate with regards to takeaway and delivery. Don't get me wrong. We do have the flip side of that. So like I said, we have 10 branches in Nairobi. And we do have the flip side where we do have locations that are stronger on takeaway and delivery because of their proximity to residential area. And as a result, they do better takeaway and delivery business than they would when dining. But the primary message is takeaway and delivery cannot be a like-for-like substitute for the dining experience. Welcome. I know we probably have quite a few of our delivery partners on the call, but let's also analyze that delivery partner situation a bit, and you see what it means to us. So I pay rent to my landlords around the city to trade from those locations. But I also pay a percentage of my sales to delivery partners. We have 3 or 4 major ones now in the local market, and we pay a percentage of our sales. But I'm still paying the rent. So the rent hasn't disappeared. It's still there. And I see an increase in my delivery cost because delivery is now my primary mode of service. So yes, we need them both. It's not a question of which one is better than the other. One cannot be a complete substitute for the other one.
We're having a conversation with Leonard Mudachi. He's the chairman of the Retail Traders Association of Kenya, CEO of Big Square Restaurant, talking about the impact of the COVID-19 restrictions now to this industry, the eateries industry particularly, and the retail sector in general. As we do this, we'd like to bring you this breaking news of the death of Kiambaa MP Paul Koinange. The family has confirmed that the MP has passed away due to COVID-19 complications. Among those that have sent messages of condolence is President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has mourned the Kiambaa MP and says he was a keen and steadfast supporter of Kenya's peace agenda as the chairperson of the National Assembly Security Committee. This is Kiambaa MP Paul Koinange, who has passed on this morning, family says, after complications due to COVID-19. The conversation with our guest, Leonard Mudachi, continues. We're looking at then what is it that this industry can do to pivot, and also just like you're saying, Leonard, to stay afloat, to make sure that you will still be there when times get better. Now, it's not an easy conversation to have. Last year, the government rolled out the stimulus package for the hospitality sector. And we're asking the same question yesterday to the chairman of the Kenya Tourism Federation, Mohamed Hersi. Have the members of or the actors in this sector been able to access those funds, and how have you been able to use those funds?
I will say from my part, and I think I speak on behalf of the restaurant trade, no, we have not been able to access, and not for a lack of trying. Whether we're not considered priority or what the reasoning is. But like I said, we're still in a space in Kenya where restaurants are not looked at as hardcore hospitality. When the conversation is being had, particularly in government circles, we tend to look at the tourism trade, but rarely do you hear mention of the restaurant trade. So we'd like to see greater access to these funds to the restaurant sector, because we have, like I said, because of Muga's question about the good years and my response that the last 10 to 15 years have been quite good for the restaurant industry. Unfortunately, we don't feel that the policymakers have caught up to this trend that the restaurants are now, one, huge contributors to the levy, and two, are fast emerging and probably big component of the tourism industry. But I'd also like to take an opportunity to it may seem that we are really bitter with the landlords, but no, it's not the case. We understand that our landlords are business people. And as a result, if concessions are being thought about, can concessions start from the top? Because if landlords do get some kind of concession, then and it's publicized that they have, then we can go back to them and ask for concessions. Because what we are doing now is we are saying, help me because my business has been hit hard. Yeah, and the landlord is basically having to help us at his expense. You know, he's developed his facility, which we then use, but he does not. He was expecting, he invested for a return. So everyone's rug has been pulled from under their feet. Mine, because my restaurant revenues have been slowed down out of no fault of our own. Second, I then go to the landlord and ask him, so you need to reduce my rent because I can't trade. But someone needs, where does the landlord go?
But Leonard, consider for a moment. I mean, this is a radio talk show and we have to talk politely to each other. But if you have an unusual situation such as the one that we have, and you're thinking and planning and strategizing seems to be what at best would be just normal planning and strategy, you write a polite letter to the government and you expect the government to understand that you have grown as an industry. You are a taxpayer as far as they're concerned. The things that you need people to understand, it is you who must get them to understand. They're not going to understand it if you don't get them to understand. If you look at your restaurants, for instance, the way you place them, I'm talking about the one, say, for instance, in Lavington. You can't miss it. Given where it's situated, you cannot miss it. If I'm looking at the one on Mombasa Road, again, you can't miss it. There is this sign that shouts at you. Now, in the same way, that safe space that the people you deal with inhabit, you must invade it with strategic plans and thinking that will get them to look at it and see things the way you see them. Because they don't. As far as they are concerned, they just see it the way they've seen it all along. You're a taxpayer. Pay your tax. What's your problem?
I think, Muga, that is why I'm here talking to you today, in an attempt to do exactly what you're asking me to do, yes. To inform and enlighten, so that I can be better heard, or we can be better heard going forward. Let's take something that Senator Sakaja said. Yeah, Kenya is an agricultural economy.
So they tell us
66%, I think, was his quote of our GDP is comes from agriculture. Let's take that back and backward integrate our restaurant business and discuss momentarily about our impact on the farmer. Yeah? I mean, think about what this lockdown has done to the farmer. Yeah? And when you sit down, I encourage you to do this as a client next time the restaurant, once dining is open. Sit down and look at your menu in any restaurant, not just our restaurant, but sit down and look at your menu and try and look at each menu item and ask yourself what has come, where has this stuff come from? And it will shock you how big an impact. These are early days of this lockdown, so we want to, if you want the data from last year, I remember having a conversation with one of my suppliers, and this is a local manufacturer of ice cream. And the local manufacturer of ice cream was telling us that, listen, I have I've run my production line. I've made all the ice cream that I can make, and I've frozen it. It's in my freezer. My freezers are full. Yeah, but my milk farmers who supply me with the fresh milk to make the ice cream, their cows don't know that
They have not frozen their milk.
So they are still being milked every day. And he says, I've told them I can't take any more milk, but they still come to my gate in the hope that I take the milk, because we can't. So think about eggs, think about fresh fruits, think about tomatoes, think about onions, think about beef. One of our big meat suppliers was the first person to call me on Friday after the call, because, as you know, ribs are a big thing in our brand. And so they called us and says, we had really increased production in preparation for Easter. So we are full. We have stocked up and we were ready to sell to you. And now you're not going to take it up. So I think we're not just, if there's someone in the tax office that is sitting there and saying, you're a taxpayer, pay your taxes, I would assert that is very naive of them and a failure to understand. And we could do much better as a country if there was an understanding on the fundamentals of businesses and how they work, and hence how they impact tax.
Leonard, we thank you very much for speaking to us today. Just like you said, you have reached out to 3 ministries, the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Tourism, with some of the requests that you have. Also reach out to legislators. Johnson Sakaja of the Senate side, you can reach out to him. Reach out to also the committees of the National Assembly. Push this conversation as much as you can, and we wish you all the best. Yes, of course, we know that this industry employs very, very many people, and the impact on this would be huge.
Yeah, just to thank you all, 1, for your vibrant questions, and 2, for having me on the show. And yes, we will reach out, but we would also request the legislators to be more accessible to us, because we are in crisis.
Sure.
And we are trying to save Kenyan jobs and Kenyan taxes. So if they are our legislators, and if they can reach
The
out
offices are there, Bwana. Everybody knows where Parliament is. Surely.
Yeah, but
Leonard, tell him you're not going to talk to air, eh?
that if you don't just randomly saunter into Parliament.
Exactly.
Yeah, come, So if
I know, I get you. Leonard Mudachi, thank you very much for speaking to us. Chairman of the Retail Traders Association of Kenya, CEO of Big Square in Kenya.